The leather of the passenger seat groaned as she shifted. It was a stark, uncomfortable sound in the dead quiet of the car. Mark gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. The only other sounds were the rhythmic thump of the wipers pushing away a light drizzle and a faint, slurred humming from the woman beside him, Miss Albright, his boss. The iron-fisted CEO of Sterling Corp, a woman who commanded boardrooms with a single glance, was trying to roll down a window that was already down. It's stuffy in here, Michael," she mumbled, her voice thick and strange. "It's Mark, ma'am," he corrected gently, for the third time. He kept his eyes locked on the slick, rain-painted road ahead, feeling the heat of her heavy, unfocused gaze on him. This was all wrong. You're not supposed to see your boss like this, fragile and disheveled, her immaculate hairstyle falling apart, her designer dress rumpled. You're not supposed to know that she smells of expensive gin and a much deeper, profound sadness. He had a daughter at home waiting for him, a stack of bills on the counter, and a job he absolutely couldn't afford to lose. And yet here he was, driving his intoxicated boss into a rich, unfamiliar neighborhood, with a growing dread in his stomach that this one act of kindness was about to cost him everything. Just 10 hours earlier, Mark's world couldn't have been more different from the tense, silent luxury of Miss Albright's sedan. His world was small, but it was bright. It was the smell of slightly burnt pancakes and the sound of his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, giggling as she tried to flip one herself. "Dad, it's a heart, a pancake heart," she'd exclaimed that morning, pointing to a lopsided blob in the pan. Mark had leaned over and ruffled her hair. "It's the most beautiful pancake heart I've ever seen. Now, eat up. You've got that big spelling test today." Their mornings were a machine, fine-tuned by necessity, a symphony of packed lunches, frantic searches for matching socks, and a final hug at the school gate that Mark cherished more than anything. He was a single dad, a title he wore with both pride and a constant low-level anxiety. Every decision, every dollar, every minute was measured against Lily's happiness. His job at Sterling Corp was a means to an end. He was a junior data analyst, just a small cog in a huge gleaming machine. He was good at his job, meticulous, reliable, and quiet. He just kept his head down, did the work, and went home. In an office that prized aggressive networking and flashy presentations, Mark's steady competence usually made him invisible. He saw the ambitious climbers, the ones who laughed loudest at the executives' jokes, and stayed late not for work, but to be seen. That just wasn't him. His ambition had a different face. It was Lily's smile, the roof over her head, and the art supplies she loved. And at the very top of this corporate pyramid sat Miss Eleanor Albright. To Mark and the rest of the junior staff, she wasn't so much a person as she was a legend, the Ice Queen. She moved through the office like a ghost in sharp, tailored suits, her presence sucking all the idle chatter out of her room. Her emails were brutally efficient, her feedback was surgically precise, and her expression was permanently set to a cool, unreadable neutrality. Mark had been in the same room with her a dozen times, but he doubted she could pick his face out of a lineup. She was power, she was pressure, and she was the silent, intimidating force that signed his paychecks. He respected her, even feared her, but he couldn't imagine a world where their paths would ever truly cross. Life, however, has a funny way of ignoring the lines we draw for ourselves. The email announcing the annual company gala had landed 2 months earlier. Attendance was mandatory. For most, it was a night of free drinks, catered food, and awkward small talk. For Mark, it was a logistical and financial headache. A babysitter for Lily was an expense he hadn't planned for. He'd almost declined, planning to cite a family emergency, but his supervisor had warned him that not showing up would be noted, and getting noted by the executive team was a risk he just couldn't take. So there he was, standing awkwardly near a potted fern, nursing a single glass of sparkling water. He felt as out of place as a pigeon in a peacock enclosure. He watched his colleagues transform under the dim lights and flowing booze, their professional masks slipping away to reveal ambition, insecurity, and a whole lot of gossip. Halfway through the night, Miss Albright took the stage. A hush fell over the crowd. She looked, as always, perfect. She announced the company's record-breaking profits and then unveiled the Odyssey Project, a massive, 5-year initiative that would redefine their industry. It was her brainchild, something she had reportedly poured years of her life into. "The leadership for this defining project will be announced in the coming week," she'd said, her voice crisp and clear, betraying no emotion. This will be our legacy. A wave of excited whispers rippled through the room. A promotion to lead the Odyssey project would make a person's entire career. Mark watched as people immediately started swarming the other senior executives, trying to position themselves. He, of course, was nowhere near that league. He just watched. And that's when he first noticed it. After her speech, Miss Albright didn't mingle. She didn't accept congratulations. Instead, she made her way to a quiet corner of the bar, her back to the room. Mark saw the bartender pour her a drink, then another, and then a third, one right after the other. She wasn't celebrating. It looked more like she was hiding. An hour went by. The party began to thin out. Mark, always conscious of the babysitter's hourly rate, was about to slip out unnoticed when he saw a small commotion near the bar. A few of the senior managers were whispering, casting nervous glances toward their CEO. Miss Albright was slumped slightly in her chair, her hand clumsy as she reached for her glass. They saw her, they whispered, and then, one by one, they turned and walked away. They were afraid to get involved, afraid to cross that impenetrable wall she'd built around herself. It was safer to just pretend they didn't see. A knot tightened in Mark's gut. He couldn't just leave her there. It felt wrong. He thought of Lily and the lessons he tried to teach her about kindness, about helping people who need it. What kind of father would he be if he just walked away? Taking a deep breath, he went over. "Miss Albright?" he asked softly. She looked up, her eyes struggling to focus on him. "Do I know you?" she asked, her voice a fragile whisper of its usual command. "I'm Mark, ma'am, from the analytics department. The party's ending. Can I help you get a ride home?" She stared at him for a long moment, a flicker of suspicion or confusion in her eyes. Then she gave a slow, tired nod. "My keys, in my purse." Getting her to the car was an ordeal. She was unsteady on her feet, leaning heavily on him. He could feel dozens of eyes on his back, the last remaining employees, the event staff. He heard a snicker from a group of junior execs near the door. "Looks like someone's trying for a promotion the hard way," one of them muttered. The words stung, but Mark ignored them, focusing only on getting Miss Albright safely to her car. The drive was when the true weirdness of it all sank in. The inside of her car, a top-of-the-line Mercedes, was as immaculate and impersonal as her office. No stray papers, no coffee cups, not a single sign that a human being actually used it. It was a sterile, silent bubble, and he was breaking all the rules just by being there. After he gently corrected her on his name for the third time, she fell silent, just staring at the blurred city lights. "They all left," she said suddenly, her voice barely a whisper. "They just watched, and they left." It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact, hollow and bare. "People get nervous around the boss, I guess," Mark offered, just to fill the silence. She let out a short, bitter laugh that sounded completely alien coming from her. "The boss, the ice queen, that's what they call me, isn't it?" Mark didn't answer. He just kept driving, following the GPS to an address that led them deeper and deeper into the city's most exclusive suburb. "He would have been 7 this year," she said, her voice cracking on the last word. Mark's blood ran cold. He glanced over. A single tear was tracing a path through her perfect makeup. He didn't know who he was, and he knew he shouldn't ask. This was a boundary he could not cross. He stayed silent, his heart aching for this woman he barely knew. He finally pulled into the driveway of a massive, modern mansion that was completely dark. It looked more like a museum than a home, beautiful, but cold and utterly empty. He helped her to the door and fumbled with her keys until he found the right one. The inside was just as he'd imagined, huge, minimalist, and as silent as a tomb. "Can I get you some water, ma'am?" he asked, helping her to a sofa that looked like it had never been sat on. She just shook her head, her eyes closed. He hesitated, not wanting to just leave her. On the polished marble countertop in the kitchen, he found a notepad. He wrote a simple message, *Miss Albright, I hope you feel better in the morning. I left a bottle of water and some aspirin here for you. I made sure the door was locked when I left. Mark P. He placed it beside the glass of water and 2 pills, then let himself out, the quiet click of the lock echoing in the massive entryway. The entire drive home, his mind raced. Did I do the right thing? Did I overstep? That comment from the executives replayed in his head. What if she woke up, embarrassed and angry, and fired him for seeing her so vulnerable. He thought of Lily, sleeping soundly in her bed, and a wave of pure fear washed over him. Mark hardly slept, his mind racing with anxious what-ifs. He woke up feeling more tired than when he went to bed. The morning routine with Lily was a relief, a small piece of normalcy in the face of terrifying uncertainty. As he dropped her off at school, he hugged her a little tighter than usual. Walking into the office felt like walking into a lion's den. The air was thick with unspoken gossip. He could feel the stares, could hear the whispers stop as he walked past. The story of him leaving with Miss Albright had clearly made the rounds. He sat at his desk and tried to disappear into his spreadsheets, his heart pounding with every email notification. At 10:15 a.m., the email he was dreading finally arrived. The subject line was a single ominous word, meeting. The sender, E. Albright. The body of the email was just as brief. My office. Now. His blood turned to ice. This was it. He stood up on shaky legs, his colleagues openly staring now, their faces a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. The walk to her corner office felt like a mile. The door was slightly ajar. He knocked softly. Come in, her voice commanded. It was back. The cold, crisp, powerful voice he knew. He stepped inside. She was sitting behind her enormous desk, looking as if last night had never happened. Her hair was perfect, her suit was immaculate. The Ice Queen was back on her throne. The only clue to the previous night was the slight puffiness around her eyes. She didn't ask him to sit, she just stared at him, her expression impossible to read. Mr. Peters, she began, her voice dangerously calm. We need to discuss the events of last night. Of course, Miss Albright, Mark said, his own voice barely a whisper. It has come to my attention that you took it upon yourself to escort me from the company gala. You weren't well, ma'am. I just wanted to make sure you got home safely. She raised an eyebrow, a gesture so sharp it felt like a slap. Is that what you call it? I've also been told that my personal driver, who was on standby, was sent home by someone matching your description. And my colleagues saw you helping me into my own car and driving away. Tell me, Mr. Peters, what exactly were your intentions? It's a very bold move for a junior analyst to take such liberties with the CEO. Some might see it as a desperate and frankly pathetic attempt at currying favor. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was exactly what he had feared. She thought he was just another opportunist. He felt a flash of anger, but it was quickly swamped by a deep sense of disappointment. Ma'am, he said, finding a strength he didn't know he had. My only intention was to help. You were in no condition to be left alone, and everyone else, they just walked away. I did send your driver home, but that was after I found your phone to call him, and you were already asleep in my car. It seemed pointless to wake you. I drove you home, helped you inside, left you a glass of water, and then I left. That's it. He looked her directly in the eye, his gaze unwavering. He had his integrity, and if that was all he left this job with, so be it. For the first time, he saw a flicker in her composure, a tiny crack in the ice. She held his gaze for a long, silent moment, as if she was searching his face for something deceit, ambition, a lie. She didn't find it. Slowly, the rigid posture she held began to soften. The sharp line of her shoulders drooped. She broke eye contact, looking down at her perfectly manicured hands, which were now trembling just slightly. You left a note, she said, her voice suddenly fragile. It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. She took a deep, shuddering breath. When she looked up again, her eyes were glistening with unshed tears. The Ice Queen had melted. No one has shown me that kind of simple, uncomplicated kindness in a very long time, Mark, she said, using his first name. All the formality was gone, replaced by a raw, startling vulnerability. The gala, she continued, her voice thick with emotion. It falls on a difficult anniversary for me. It's the day I was named a partner at my old firm. The day I got the capital to start this company. Everyone thinks it's the day my career was made, but it's also the day my life fell apart. Mark stood in stunned silence. His own anger and fear were completely gone, replaced by a wave of empathy. Years ago, before all of this, I was a different person, she confessed, her gaze distant. I was young, and I had a son. His name was Samuel. She said the name like it was a sacred thing she kept locked away from the world. He was my whole world. His father wasn't in the picture. It was just the two of us. I was working 2 jobs, going to night school, just trying to build something for him. The day I made partner was the proudest day of my life. I was finally going to be able to give him everything. I called his daycare to say I was on my way to pick him up, that we were going to celebrate. She paused, swallowing hard against a sob. There had been an accident on the playground. A fall, a terrible, senseless, 1 in a million accident. He was gone, just like that. The air in the room grew heavy with the weight of a grief she had clearly carried alone for years. Mark felt his own throat tighten. "He would have been 7 this year, Mark," she whispered, her eyes finally meeting his. "The same age as your daughter. I've seen you, you know. In the company newsletter, at the family picnic last summer. I see the way you look at her, that joy, that fierce protection. I see the father you are, and, I admit, I've been jealous of you." The revelation hit Mark like a physical blow. Miss Albright wasn't an ice queen. She was a mother, frozen in time. She had built this shell of success and power to protect a heart that had been completely shattered. Her coldness wasn't cruelty, it was a shield. The Odyssey Project, the company, her entire life's work, it was all a monument built on a foundation of unimaginable loss. Her drinking at the party wasn't a weakness. It was a desperate attempt to numb a pain that, for her, was as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. Mark didn't know what to say. There's no chapter in the employee handbook for this, so he just stood there, offering his silent, compassionate presence. He let her cry, not with the messy sobs of the night before, but with the quiet, dignified tears of a woman who hadn't let herself grieve in a very long time. After a few minutes, she composed herself, wiping her eyes with a tissue. A new resolve seemed to settle over her. "Last night, you didn't see a CEO," she said, her voice steadier now. "You saw a person. You didn't see an opportunity. You saw someone who needed help. For years, I've been rewarding the loudest voices and the most aggressive players. I've been so focused on building a legacy of strength, I forgot that the strongest foundations are built on character." She motioned to his personnel file on her desk. On top of it was a small framed photo. It was the one from the company picnic, of him with Lily on his shoulders, both of them laughing. "The Odyssey Project," she said, her voice firm, now filled with a new kind of authority. "It needs a leader with vision, yes, but more than that, it needs a leader with humanity. It needs someone who understands that our people are our greatest asset. It needs someone who does the right thing, not just when no one is watching, but when everyone is watching." She stood up and walked around the desk to stand in front of him. "The job is yours, Mark. If you want it, this isn't a reward for driving me home. It's an acknowledgement that I've been looking for the wrong qualities in a leader all along. Your integrity is your greatest qualification." Mark was speechless. He could only nod, 1,000 emotions swirling inside him: gratitude, shock, sadness for her loss, and a dizzying sense of hope for his own future. 6 months later, the offices of Sterling Corp felt different. The air was a little lighter. Miss Albright Eleanor, as she now insisted he call her, still commanded respect, but the fear she once inspired had been replaced by genuine admiration. She smiled more. She knew people's names. She started a company-wide mentorship program, personally championing employees who showed character and diligence, not just blind ambition. Mark, now the director of the Odyssey Project, was thriving. He led his team with the same quiet competence and empathy he'd always had. The promotion meant financial stability he'd only ever dreamed of. He could now afford a small house with a backyard for Lily. But the real change was deeper. He had a new purpose at work and a surprising, profound friendship with the woman he once thought of as the Ice Queen. Sometimes, late in the afternoon, Eleanor would stop by his office, and they would just talk about the project, about their days, and sometimes, quietly, about their children. He learned about Samuel's love for dinosaurs, and she loved hearing about Lily's latest art project. One evening, as Mark was packing up, he looked at the picture of him and Lily on his new, larger desk. He thought about that strange, fateful night that had changed everything. He realized that the most valuable things in life, kindness, integrity, empathy, aren't things you can trade for a promotion. They're the currency of the human heart. You truly never know the silent battles other people are fighting. And sometimes, a simple act of compassion, offered with no strings attached, can be the key that unlocks everything. It's incredible how one small act of kindness can completely change someone's life. We all have the power to look past the surface and see the real person underneath. What did you think of Mark's decision to help? Let us know in the comments below. And for more inspirational stories that remind us of the power of character, don't forget to like and subscribe.